My daughter has gotten me twice. The first time she was about 2 and was just starting to talk. We had just put her to bed and left her room. A few minutes later, she walks into the living and says, "Daddy, there's a hand in my bed." Completely okay with it. She just wanted to tell me. So of course I walk her back to bed, no hand to be seen. The second was today. She's almost 4. She starts telling my wife about the mamas that visit her at night. My wife prodded her for more. She says that they have tape on their eyes and fingers. They can't talk because they can't breathe. They sound like a dinosaur. There's 2 of them. The little one likes to sleep in her bed. That they want the ring, and they only talk to kids because adults want to hurt them. Once again, there's no fear in her voice as she tells this. That second gave me chills. My daughter, when she was about 3, asked my mom if she could see the other grandma standing behind her. My aunt had passed away about a week before this. When she was 6, she said there was a big white ghost behind her bedroom door. This creeped out my then BF, so she said, "It's okay, I was only kidding. I meant the big boo like in Super Mario." She later told me that she lied to him, so he wouldn't be scared anymore. When she was 7, we were driving home and saw some rabbits hopping through the ditch, and I said, "Look at the bunnies." And she said, "Those are nighttime bunnies, don't go near them, they'll get you." A few times, between the ages of 8 to 11, she told me about a little girl in her school who nobody else would talk to. I asked her why nobody else talked to the girl. She said, "I don't think anybody else can see her." I grew up in a cabin house out in the woods with only one neighbor. My dad always watched scary movies. I watched with him, so I was very afraid of the dark. Aside from having trouble sleeping, I was especially troubled by the bathroom in my room. It always felt like I was being watched. I would always be scared to pull the shower curtain back because I was so convinced someone or something would be there. Well, we moved out. No scary shower demons. A few years later, my dad's girlfriend had a friend move into the house. Her daughter was 3 to 4 years old and had recently picked up the habit of taking gum from her mom's purse. Her mom let it slide because she was young. Until one day, she asked her daughter why she kept taking the gum without asking. Her daughter replied, "It's for the little boy who lives in my bathroom. She has my old bedroom." There was a story a friend of mine told me once about a family he knew with a 4-year-old daughter. My friend is a pretty trustworthy guy, so I believe the story. Anyway, so this is a religious family, and one night the wife has a nightmare that the devil was choking her in her bed. At some point in the nightmare, he looks back, like he heard something, and then ran out of the room. The next day, the wife was a little shaken up by the dream, but nothing major. Then the daughter woke up and asked, "Mommy, why was there a red man leaving your room last night?" My daughter once woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "Who's Charlotte?" I was completely confused, as we didn't know anyone named that. The next morning, my daughter said, "Charlotte is nice and says hello." It hit me later that day. Charlotte was my grandmother who died before I was born. I never even met her. I was a counselor at a summer camp, and there was one little 6-year-old kid who never really seemed to fit in because the other kids thought he was scary, their words. He was a little weird in a sort of darkish way, but I just figured he had a dark sense of humor or something. He would just sit there on the side of the field, glaring at everyone, and I'd always try to get him involved in a game or something. One day he waved me over, giving me a look that was pretty scary for a 6-year-old, and motioned for me to move close to him so he could tell me a secret. He whispered in my ear, "Your mother brought you into this world, and I swear to God, I'm going to take you out of it. Got it?" I kind of laughed a bit, thinking it was that dark sense of humor I thought he had, but he just glared at me, put a finger to his lips as if he was saying, "Shh," and turned away from me. Creepy as fuck. My 2-year-old in the car, first time telling a story, tells me, "When I was big and you were little, We were in a car that turned upside down and went on its roof. My brother died in a car accident 20 years previous because it rolled. I say, "Yeah?" He continues, "Yeah, and when I was big and you were little, I was in a house that was on fire." At this point in his life, he has actually never even seen fire. And for extra chills, a sister I never got to meet died in a house fire 1 year before I was born. My mom died a little bit over 10 years ago. Our neighbors, we will call them Chuck and Kim, had a 4-year-old granddaughter. My mom had a weird nickname. Everyone called her Gum. When I was younger, I asked her why, and she told me she would tell me when I was older. I never asked again, because I don't want the reason to be what I think it could be. Anyhow, the 4-year-old told Chuck one day out of the blue, Gum said, "Don't be sad." She did not know my mom. No one talked about my mom dying to her. Perhaps she heard them talking about my mom. Weird still. My sister-in-law was about a month pregnant, and we told my son about her having a baby in her tummy when she came down to visit. A week later, I asked him if he was excited about Auntie's baby. He didn't even look up from playing with his toys and said, "Auntie's baby isn't in there anymore." A couple days later, she called to say she had a miscarriage. A co-worker recently told me a story involving her 4-year-old son. A few weeks ago, she and her son were at a neighbor's barbecue. A middle-aged neighbor comes over and admires the boy. She asks him how old he is. He looks up and calmly says, "I want to slit your throat." He's now under psychiatric care and has been marked as a blossoming psychopath. When my son was a baby, we lived in a rental house. It was in a good part of town, and the rent was really cheap for the area. After meeting a few of the neighbors, we found out that the reason we got such a good deal on the rent was that none of the previous tenants, over the last 5 years, had stayed longer than 4 months before suddenly packing up and moving. Then they told us that the man who had owned the house before my landlord had lung cancer and was bedridden there for several years before dying. I don't normally spook easily, so I wasn't too concerned, even though there were quite a few weird incidents. A light fixture falling to the floor and shattering in the middle of the night. A fire that started in the trash can while I was in the room, and knew there was nothing to have started it. The doorbell ringing at odd times, even after we had it replaced with a new one. Weird shadows echoed. We really loved the house though, so we just put up with it. The only time I was ever really creeped out was one night as I was putting my son in his bed. He was about 2 at the time, and all of a sudden he sat straight up and said, "Mommy, what's that man doing there?" I asked him what he meant, and he pointed to an empty corner of his room and said, "That man," standing right there, and was completely confused when I couldn't see anything. I had trouble sleeping for quite a while after that. Not me, but my neighbors. Anyway, the little boy, probably 6 or 7 at the time, and his mother were in the backyard while she was gardening. The kid got thirsty, as kids do on hot summer days, and went inside to get something to drink, and didn't come back out for about 30 minutes. When he finally came out, his mom asked him if he was okay, to which he responded, "I'm okay," but the man in the living room, nobody else had any sort of access to their house, ran out the front door. I didn't sleep for a week after hearing this. I was babysitting once. I think the little girl was 3 or 4 years old, and she was falling asleep on the couch, so I decided to bring her up to her room. As soon as I put her in and closed the door, she started screaming, crying, so I ran back in and asked her what was wrong, and all she said was, "I don't want to be in here." So I sat with her until she fell asleep again, and quietly left the room. Once I got downstairs, she started crying again, so I ran back up, and when I went into her room, she was sitting up in bed staring at the corner of the ceiling. So I picked her up and took her back downstairs with me, and she said, "I can't sleep because of the man on my ceiling." Needless to say, I never babysat there again. When my daughter, now 17, was around age 4 to 5, she calmly informed me that she had lived before she was born. She described very vividly her life as a young woman who lived in an apartment, driving a VW Bug and dying in a fall down the steps to her apartment. She told us details about this other life several times, always consistent with the details. Quite unnerving yet fascinating. If you're craving more spine-chilling tales, join us for more haunting mysteries and horror stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications.